All right, and welcome to another episode of Let's Help a Stranger. In today's episode, I was cruising the Blender subreddit, and I saw this meme about flex tape. It says me, low quality model, which clearly has a leak, and slap. It's stylized. And I relate to this a lot because I do feel like a lot of beginners make models that don't look. You don't have to go photorealistic, but you can, hide your mistakes by calling it stylized. And in those comments, the Reddit user Watchtowel, says, you got me. But the big question in my workflow for me is, how do I get a quality model out of a photogrammetry scan? Now, I have worked with photogrammetry a lot. I used to be a 3D modeler for Google. And if you look at my website, a lot of the objects that I did on my portfolio were for Google. And one of the things we did is we had a team of people who would do 3D scans using photogrammetry. And then sometimes we would have to clean up 3D scans. Other times we just made things from scratch if the 3D scan was too awful. And I can show you some of that stuff if I just go to my website here. And I go to 3D modeling. A lot of this stuff, for instance, like this camera was my first thing that I ever did professionally. I did this in Blender. I had to render it in Maya using Mental Ray, which I absolutely hated. But these renders are from Blender because I prefer cycles better. But the reason why I did this camera was because the 3D scan of the camera didn't work well. Same thing with like this tablet for kids, like the materials and the surface of it, it just didn't scan well, so I had to make my own 3D model from scratch. And so pretty much all of these are 3D models that I did professionally. I did hundreds of them. These are just like, my favorite ones. You can only show a monitor so many times. I've literally done, 100 different Asus monitors. They all look almost identical with, a few exceptions of like the ports on the back and stuff like that. So we dealt with cleaning up 3D scans and a 3D, photogrammetry scan. If you want to clean it up, you have to, here's what I said, is learn how to retopo or retopologize. And so Watchtowel said, well, thank you. I'm looking to it right now. Do you know if the texture will work on the retopologized model? And the answer is yes. But there's some complicated steps. And I said, maybe I'll make a video on this today. Well, it's been 20 hours since I said this. I have slept in between, so don't worry. But I decided to go ahead and make a video on this. And I used Agisoft Photoscan. Now, this software I think is deprecated, but I used this software professionally before, and I'm familiar with it, so I used it. I've also used other software doing photogrammetry professionally. I used Reality Capture, which confusingly is by a company called Capturing Reality. So Capturing Reality, you go here. But then their product is called Reality Capture. So let's go to it. So the website's Capturing Reality, but their product is Reality Capture. And I really liked this product. I also tried Mushroom. And if we go to here, I downloaded this. Now, my best results, I tried Mushroom. Didn't work that well for me, so my best results came from Agisoft Photoscan. Now, like I said, I believe this software is no longer available, but I have an old copy from when I was doing it for my job, and so I just used that. And I have this Nintendo Amiibo. That's what they're called, right? Amiibo, yep. That's the woolly, yarn Yoshi that was done when Yoshi's Epic Yarn came out, or whatever the game is called. And so I thought this would be a good object to scan because it has a very interesting, surface. And also it would be like a character, and it would be something that, maybe you'd want to learn how to retopo if you had sculpted this instead. So this works both for photo scanning as well as sculpting. This is basically a general, retopologize tutorial. So I think it works on both those fronts. So this scan came out pretty good from Agisoft. The mushroom scan did not come out nearly as good, so I'm really happy that I got one here. And I will show you how to retopologize this. So let's go over to Blender. I'm in Blender 2.8. Like I mentioned in previous videos, I'm using a custom theme. So I'm not using the dark theme from Blender 2.8, but I am using a custom theme that I made myself that makes me feel comfortable. So from Agisoft, if you right click and you say export model, it'll give you an OBJ file with a texture. So I'm going to go ahead and import that. So let's do that now. And it should, let's go into look dev, we should get some textures as well. Because it should have, if we click on, yep, there's the textures. It has a material that was generated by Agisoft. And it has the texture already loaded. So the first thing to notice is if we grab it, you'll notice that right here is its origin, but the origin should be inside this geometry. So I'm going to right click, say set origin to geometry, and now you notice that this dot is there. So if I go into my menu and I say not scale but position 0, he's now at the center, and I'm going to hit N to hide that. And I'll try to use the screencast keys, but it doesn't work well in 2.8, so we'll see what happens. But anyways, so I'm going to hit R twice to kind of rotate him. When you hit R twice, you go into trackball mode. Then I hit R once. All right. Bring him up a bit, grab Z. Why can't I? What is my median point? Not sure why I can't. Do I have snapping on? Oh, that's why. Because he's rotated wrong. So let's rotate like that, then grab Z. Alright, I hit 1 on the numpad so that I'm looking like, forwards. Let's rotate on Z a little bit so he's looking a little bit straighter. Now, if this was a model that I had sculpted, it would probably have perfect symmetry. But this is literally a, woolly amiibo that I had 3D scanned. So you can see that, his nose and his face are kind of like tilted to the left, and this arm is higher than this arm. And so it doesn't have symmetry. So we're not going to worry about symmetry for this process. But we've now got him more or less centered, and I'm happy with that. So we're going to talk about how to set up the retopologize workflow. So the first thing I always do is I start by adding a plane. So the reason why I add a plane is because once I set it up correctly, I know that everything is working. So I'm going to take this plane and rotate it, go to front view, scale it down a bit, and just kind of like put it on his nose, just so it's just right there in front of his nose. And I'll hit Control A and hit Apply Scale, just so everything is in correct scale. Shouldn't matter too much in this case, but I'm going to do it anyways. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to, with the plane selected, you can see plane is selected here, and I'm going to rename this from Yoshi V001 to Scan, just so we know what it is. And the plane I'm going to rename to Retopo. And right now is probably a good time to save, so I'm going to go into Tutorial and just save this as Yoshi V001. All right, so what we want to do is, with the retopo object, which is the plane, that's what we previously just renamed it. The first thing we want to do is go into our modifiers menu and add a subdivision surface. Now, this will be different than you've ever used subdivision surface before. Typically, you use subdivision surface to have nice rounded effects. If we increase the viewport levels, you can see it gets even rounder. And if we do it again, it gets even rounder. But in this case, we are going to keep it at 1. But we're going to switch from Catmull Clark to simple. And if we go into a wireframe, oops, you'll see what that's doing is it's just dividing it once in the middle. If we increase, we get dividing it twice, or squared, so you get 4. But we're going to leave it at 1. But Catmull Clark tries to do this rounding algorithm, whereas simple does this it subdivides it just doesn't round it out. And while we're in wireframe mode, you can see that our Yoshi model is very high resolution. This is exactly what it would look like from a 3D scan, because this was a 3D scan, but this is also what it would look like if you're coming from a sculpt. Maybe the surface would be a little bit more recognizable if it was from a sculpt, but either way, you're going to end up with this, whether it's from a sculpt or a 3D scan, some ridiculously high resolution model. And as you can see down here, we have 180,000 faces, 180,000 triangles. So this is absolutely awful. But that's why we're going to fix it. So let's go back into look dev mode. And we have this plane here, and we've now subdivided it. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to choose shrink wrap. And what shrink wrap modifier does is basically kind of what it says on the box, is it will try to, wrap another mesh around a base mesh, as if you were, imagine you have some object in real life and you get some saran wrap and you try to wrap it. Shrink wrap does that. So we're going to choose our target here. I'm going to click this eyedropper and then click on our object called scan. And you can see that plane now tries to snap to the surface. But what we want to do is we want to say above surface. And then from a side view, just very carefully adjust this offset so it's just above the surface, but not too far. So that's good. Like you can see there's a little bit of a gap there. If I go too low, it starts to intersect, which is okay sometimes. Like you want something like that. Like these intersections are okay. They're not the end of the world. But you want it to basically be just a little bit above. I'll go a little bit higher still. So yeah, there's a little bit of intersection. That's fine. And then we're going to go into edit mode on this plane. And we're going to go to up here at the top. We're going to click on the magnet icon. And we're going to choose face. Now, when we grab these, you'll see that the vertices actually snap to the surface. Now, the vertices are a little bit hard to see, so in our shrink wrap modifier, we're going to click this last one, and now we can see the vertices. So what we have now is a plane that basically sticks to the surface of our scan, but this plane only has 4 faces. If you look closely, you can see there's one quad here, one quad here, one quad here, and one quad here. If we go into wireframe mode, it's a little bit hard to see, but you can see this is the one quad, but it's divided into these 4 segments, and they're being projected onto the surface of the scan. So while our scan has insanely high resolution, we've now projected this very low resolution polygon onto that surface. And so what we want to do is basically come up with a plan where we cover Yoshi's face with quads, and basically this is what retopologizing is. Now, like I said, this isn't a perfect scan, so you can see kind of, if you look at the original toy, there's like kind of this line that goes through his eyes, and then it kind of curves around here. So I'm actually going to try to follow the curves of the original object a little bit. Like I said, if this was a sculpt, there'd probably be more symmetry, but it's not a sculpt, so let's just work with what we got. So I'm going to extrude this, extrude again, and then extrude right there to the center of his eyes. And I can grab some of these points and kind of move them around, and the object is going to evolve over time. So the decisions I make right now will eventually be replaced with other decisions as I go. So let's just take all of these on this side and extrude them about to there. How about that? All right, and I'm just kind of trying to make the lines flow nice and pretty, as if this was, designed by hand. So let's make all of these kind of straighten out a bit. Oops. bring these up a bit. And so now it looks weird because these ones are too high. So kind of as you go, you can just adjust and figure out how you want to change the shape of things. Now let's do the same thing on the other side. So we're going to, it looks like I extruded basically to just a little bit right of that eye. So now we'll just go a little bit left of this eye. And then we'll go extrude down to here. And this is where I decided that things should straighten out a bit. And, you know, sometimes you try to select things and you click the wrong thing, but you'll get used to that. So let's see what this should go somewhere down like that. And, you know, so we're getting a lot of bleed through here, so I'm going to move this a little bit over, just a little bit. And, you know, like we're just making this completely up off the top of our head. There's like, you're just trying to make like nice lines that, you know, make their way around the model and then figure out how to close it up later. So, you know, I guess one of the things that's kind of scary about Retopo, I mean, you know, not scary if you've done it, you know, for a long time, but scary if you're a beginner, is that you feel like maybe you're making the wrong decisions, and that's probably not the case. You know, if as long as you're trying to follow the flow of like the shape of the model and just kind of like wing it, actually that's probably exactly what you should be doing, you know. And like, you know, you see like all these places where it's overlapping, that's like, you know, all these little islands where the 3D scan is poking through our retopo. That's completely fine. That'll be fixed up in the end. So again, you know, it's probably one of those things where you're overthinking it. So one of the things I try to do is think about how neighboring geometry will join in. So I see that there's this arm piece here, and we have like this line here, and I'm imagining that there'd be a face that fits this shape. So I'm going to extrude, and so now we have a piece there. Of course, I should probably go in and try to make these flow a little bit better. And I want to do the same thing on the other side, so we'll go ahead and do that right now. Again, like this goes to the top of the arm, so we'll extrude and imagine that there's like a face there. And I'll just do something like that. And then we'll do one more time, extrude right to the center, and I'll try to bring a lot of these points to the center. And then I'm going to choose this point and this point, hit F to complete a line there. And then choose this whole face, F, 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 F. And, you know, you can see this looks a little bit weird, so we'll just kind of, you know, finagle it till it looks nice. This is just kind of should be a relaxing kind of thing where, you know, I'm recording a video, but if I was retopoing for like a professional project, at this point I would just have like my favorite album on, and I would just be playing it while I just kind of finesse these, you know, edge loops and points into the place where I want them to finally be. You know, so this is just it's a weird process, but it's fun also. It's just one of those things where, you know, we have this object and we have to, you know, it's a horrible topology, but we're just going to take our time and, you know, move all these surfaces because we have the snapping on. They're moving on the surface of the Yoshi scan. So we're basically just, you know, carefully placing points on a existing model, and that's what retopologizing is. I mean, there is a topology. The topology comes from the 3D scan. It's not great. But we're going to re-topologize it. So we're going to take that ugly topology and try to turn it into something that makes a little bit more sense. And during the course of that, you're going to find that you're constantly moving things that you were happy with before suddenly now feel weird. And you just keep tweaking and adjusting and, you know, go from there. I'm going to leave this gap open for now, and we're going to move on. So let's see. So the next places, I guess what we could do is, because I mentioned this earlier, let's just take these two vertices. So we have an edge and extrude. And so that'll be basically the beginning of that arm segment. And we did the same thing on this side, so we'll just bring that down. And then I'll take this vertex, extrude, and then we can complete a face here and there, and we can work on that more later. Let's take this, and we'll take what, I think I should do is probably introduce a new edge loop here. And then extrude this here, and then extrude it to there, make a face there, make a face there. And because we introduced this edge loop, like I said, you're going to find yourself positioning things and then repositioning them a little bit as you add more geometry. So these can be spaced out a little bit further now. And we should probably do the same thing on the other side. So we have that, and we want to extrude to about there and to about there. And, if this was a scan, then it'd be a little bit easier because you'd be dealing with something that has symmetry. But because we don't have symmetry, because the scan is not perfect. I mean, what I should say is if this was a sculpt, it would have symmetry. But because it's not a sculpt, we don't have perfect symmetry. So I'm just kind of eyeballing it as we go, trying to figure out the best way to do things. All right, so I'm pretty happy with that so far. We're probably going to have to add more edge loops in here. In fact, I'm probably, let's see, I feel like we should add an edge loop here so that we could, better fill out his face a little bit. But I don't want to get out of sync in terms of I don't want to make things odd and even yet, so we might come back to that. So now we have to somehow bridge the top of him and do it intelligently. So let's take these 3 in the center, or actually these 4, and just bring that up here, then grab these 2 and bring these up there. And now, you can see it's making me want to move these over there, and then I'm going to put an edge loop in there so that we can kind of help capture his brow curve. Or is Yoshi a girl or a boy? I think he's the girl, right? Let's do this one to fill in, this one to fill in, and then we have to figure out what we want to do about this. So I guess what we'll do is we'll just take these, extrude to there, bring that one up, and then just fill that in. We'll do the same thing here. Take these, extrude to the other edge of his arm, bring this one up, and then fill it in. But the problem now I'm seeing is that we're losing detail here, so I'm going to insert an edge loop here and just kind of move these points around so that basically you don't want these islands to be poking through. But because we added another edge loop, we should go and kind of move that out a little bit, and we have to do the same thing on the other side. So we added one here, so this needs to go over like that. And retopology is an art on itself, so I'm giving you the crash course. There's a lot more theory that you could go into, and if you were doing this for a sculpt, especially if you were to prepare this for animation, there would be different considerations you would choose just so that you could get something animation ready. We're not doing this to be animation ready, and when I did this professionally, it was not for animation. It was to get 3D scans of objects to be low poly enough that they could be loaded in a web browser. That's what I was doing for Google. I won't talk too much about what I did for Google because although it was technically public, it was also still kind of proprietary, so I'm not going to get too much into what I did there, but you get the idea. So we're basically just trying to make this model, which is insanely high poly, into something that's reasonably low poly. And so I don't like how this is looking. We might have to add more geometry here later. It's not looking the best because look at these huge pockets that are forming. We will probably need more geometry there. What does it look on the other side? The other side looks also equally bad, but we'll see. We'll see where we go from here. So, Yeah, let's just do that. Let's just add, whoops, another one here and another one. Is that where I did it? I did it equivalent to here, I think. So we can, you know, pull this up and just, you know, we want to have the bare minimum geometry to look good. So I think adding those extra edge loops definitely makes this side look better. And now we can, you know, spread these out a little bit more. Bring this up. Bring this down. And, you know, you can see I'm just kind of like basically going over the mesh and carefully just kind of like putting it in a nice position where it looks well balanced and flows well, you know. And like I said, this is not going to be super perfect, but this is going to be pretty good for what I'm trying to accomplish. So let's take everything from here to here. And you can see that there's like this little corner here. So I'm going to extrude again, but this piece is going to go in the corner. I'm actually going to bring this one out a little bit. And we'll do the same thing on the other side. So I'm going to take these pieces where it's like kind of in the white area, extrude, put this one in the corner, bring this one back, whoops, this one back a bit. Just kind of flesh that out. And so now we can take, let's do these top ones, bring it back like that, pull this one up, and then fill that in. And look at that, I have an extra thing here, so I should probably, not sure when I added that one, but we'll deal with it. Even though this isn't like a perfectly mirrored model, you do want kind of to have the same edge loops on both sides, so things play nicely. All right, so that's looking pretty good so far. The next thing we have to do is kind of, I guess, wrap around and figure out how we're going to handle these spikes. I'm going to handle the shell in a different way. I'll probably handle the way that the feet and the arms stick out in a particular way. So we'll cross those bridges when we get there. I guess the first thing we can do is just try to, you know, flesh out the cheeks. So now that we have a little bit more geometry here to play with, I'm going to make sure that these cheeks look pretty flush. I actually made things worse there. We also want to make sure that the forehead is completely encapsulated. So I'm going to take these three again, extrude down to, let's say, here. And even one more time, and then I'll do this on the other side where I kind of bring these to, well, let's see. Actually, I'm not going to do that yet. Actually, no, I will. I just have to do it like that. Which is this piece? Yep, I was afraid of that. So sometimes you can accidentally select pieces on the far side of the geometry, and it gets a little weird. But anyways, so what do we do here? We went 2 times, so one time to about here. This one should be in that corner. And then another time to about there. All right, so we have the Yoshi cheeks filled in, and I'm going to pause here and take a little break, and then we'll come back and continue working. All right, so let's take these and bring them to the kind of edge of where these spikes start, and I want to make sure that this one kind of lines up where this divot is. And then we'll do the same thing over here. So this piece is going to be right in that corner. This is going to be right where the divot starts. And we'll do the same thing. I'll move this one down a little bit. Extrude over here. Make sure this one's where the divot starts. And then just fill this one in. This one I'll probably try to line up to be the same way. All right. And then let's take this one and move it over to the spike. We can fill this piece in, whoops, and do the same thing here. All right, and what can we do? How are we going to tackle? I guess, let's see. Let's just do the same thing again. Bring this piece over here, fill that in. Bring this vertex over there, fill that in, and then let's bring this one to right there where it starts. But I think we're going to have to make a triangle here. So, whoops, we'll make this a square, but then we'll make this one a triangle. Make this a square, but we'll make this one a triangle. And then I'm going to take this one piece, I'm going to move it up to here. Make two more triangles. Then I'm going to move it to here, roughly in line with all of the other ones. And then just fill. Why is this not working? Wireframe. I don't see anything wrong with this, but maybe I just have to be more explicit. I'll just choose these four. Okay, something is not working. Face. Okay, that works. And then why is this? This one needs to be a triangle, I guess. And, you know, this doesn't look good yet. Although I'm a little confused why it's not adding up. Why do we have more? Okay, I'm just going to delete this vertex because it's weird. Let's try from the bottom because this should add up better than what we just had there. So these are all lining up good. Yeah, I'm not sure why it was so weird the other time. But we want to add more geometry to this, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into face mode by hitting 3 on the keyboard. I'm going to go into circle select mode, select all of these faces that have to deal with the kind of back spine. I'm going to hit I for inset. I'm just going to inset these a little bit. I'm going to try from further away. There we go. Alright, so now we have more vertices to work with. I'm going to hit 1 to go back into vertex mode and kind of make sense of these vertices. So these ones I kind of want to have go up the spine area so that we don't have so much, like, you know, red peeking through. This one can go back. And that's, you know, that's working pretty well, actually. Try to center some of these. All right, I mean, that's good enough for now. You know, like the edge flows just continue to flow with the rest of the model, which is what's important. And like I said, this is not a 3D sculpt, so your edge loops are not going to be perfect because they're not, you know, mirrored on both sides. They're a little bit wonky on both sides. So both sides of the model should have roughly the same number of faces, but they're not going to be perfect edge loops because this, you know, isn't a perfectly mirrored scan. This is just a random, I say scan, I mean perfectly mirrored sculpt. So that looks pretty good. So we're doing good. So, you know, it's been, I don't know, 30 minutes so far, and we mostly have like the front of Yoshi's face done. I'll do this nose part once we make sure we have all our edge loops. You know, you can always go in here and like try to make these flow a little bit better. And I'm not going to worry about it too much in this video because I'm just trying to show you the workflow. But, you know, if you want to be meticulous, you know, by all powers to you, go and do that. You know, like, you know, you want your edges to kind of flow nicely together. You don't want weird jagged situations, but also, you know, you want to make it flow with the geometry. So sometimes you'll have to make exceptions, but I'm trying to do this as fast as possible because, well, there's literally a video being recorded and I can't go forever. But you just kind of want to make these lines flow smooth because literally we're drawing these lines on a existing model. All right, so carrying on, let's move down and start to tackle some of his body area. So I'm just going to extrude this all the way to the point where this goes into that corner pocket. And this one, so here's an interesting situation. We have no gap here, but we do have a little bit of a gap here. So I'm going to put this one to the top. I'll introduce another edge loop because I feel like we need the resolution. And then probably even we need to do this. So I'm going to now take this one, put it there, this one, put it there. And then, yeah, this is going to be a weird one because I'm going to have to extrude and do something strange like that just so that we could get that gap in there. But I'm going to take this one and these three. Let's go down a bit. Let's move these closer to the center. Now for this, what we'll probably want to do is actually just branch off a little bit. And then I guess we'll tackle this leg, so we'll go up a bit, a couple times, 2, 3, and then into that crevice. And let's try to connect those two for now. And let's do the same thing with, well, let's see, this should probably be a little bit deeper. I'm trying to just basically keep it where like the green area is, because we'll do like the foot or the shoe or whatever separately. And so let's take this one, go to the bottom of the leg. Is that what happens here? Let's see. Yeah, it's just a little bit wider. All right, we'll do a few for the leg. And then I guess connect these. There might be an extra edge loop on this side, which we might have to be aware of. It doesn't have to be perfect. Like I said, you know, this is not a sculpt, so if it's not perfectly symmetrical, that's kind of okay. Actually, kind of expected. All right, and I guess what do I want to do now? I guess we'll start bringing these pieces down and figure out how to join them to the legs later. So let's take these and extrude once. And then extrude twice. And maybe what we'll do is extrude 3 times. But we'll connect this as a face. And let's see if we can do that on the other side. So we'll extrude, I think I did this one, right? Yeah. Whoops. So you can sometimes accidentally select ones on the far side and it makes things weird. So once, I'm gonna make sure I'm getting all the right sections twice. And then 3 times, but this is different. This one should be connected to this point. So I'm going to take those two, I'm going to hit scale 0 and then Alt M merge by distance so that they're now merged. And I'm just trying to keep the geometry the same on both sides. Just it'll make the model like make sense nicer in the end. All right, so far so good. All right, and one thing I realized is that I don't really want this Yoshi tag to be part of the final model. So I'm going to actually go and delete this from our scan. I'm going to go into edit mode. I'm going to hit Alt-Z for X-ray mode. Alt-A to deselect everything. C for circle select. And then I'm going to select this tag, which I could have gotten rid of from the photo scan, but whatever. So let's delete those vertices. And it's going to put a hole here, and so now we have to match or patch that hole. So I'm going to hit, actually I'm going to undo. I might have gotten rid of too much because, yeah, I don't want the tag there, but I do kind of want these vertices to be there. So let's go back to circle select and kind of trim that back a bit. All right, let's delete those vertices. So now I want to patch this hole. So I'm going to turn transparency off, and with Alt I'm going to try to select a perimeter, and you can see it doesn't work all the way, so I'm going to delete this vertice, try again, and now we get further, but it doesn't like this one, so I'm going to delete that vertice and probably this floating one and this one also. Alright, so now we've gotten further, and I'm just trying to get a selection all the way around, so that's getting pretty close. And whenever it stops, I just delete that vertice and then try again. And oh, we're only a few away at this point. And it's probably getting stuck on this one. And there we go. And I don't like this one, so we'll get rid of it. And I'm just going to hit Alt F, and it's sloppy, but you know it'll do. It'll give us a little scar there, but we can patch that out later, so I'm not too worried about it. All right, so back to this one. I guess we'll take these 2 or 3. And so we have 1, 2, 3, 4 stops. So we'll do 1 close stop, move this over, adjust everything else. We'll do another one where this is like at the base of it. And we'll fill, oops, those in. We'll do the same thing on the other side. So we'll take these three, move it over, kind of adjust these so that they're nicer. Do it again. And so yeah, so you can see here, these should be way higher. And then this should be filled in. Now look at that. See, this is where it gets really weird, because this bottom line goes to like the top of his leg, whereas this one goes kind of halfway through it. So somewhere there's a mismatch of vertices here. I don't want to try to figure it out, because I've been down that road and it's really annoying. Again, if this was a model that had symmetry, it would be a lot easier to retopo, but because it doesn't, you're going to end up with these places where sometimes you have more vertices on one side than you would expect than on the other, and things just get really ugly, and I don't want to have to deal with it for this video, so I'm going to not deal with it. So hopefully this is pretty close to parity on both sides. So let's take these again. This time we're going to extrude down to here. And I'm going to have to figure out what to do with these ones. So this needs to have like a natural curve here. And I don't really feel like introducing a lot more geometry, so I'm just going to use those ones and kind of move these to the side. All right, and let's fill that. And let's make this less extreme. We'll put these guys over here. Let's do the same thing here. So we're going to take these ones and move them down, or extrude at least. And then, yeah, this one has to go all the way to here, into the base, and then fill that shit in. That didn't work. Hopefully that's right. Sometimes you end up with lines that shouldn't be there. All right, and then we'll take this guy. And now what we can do is just extrude this to there and fill this in, and we have completion around his shell. So let's take these. We want them to be a little bit closer to there, I guess. So let's handle his shell now. Or actually, let's see. Let's see if we can tweak these to be a little bit better. Okay, that's good. I mean, you know, you still have some things poking through, but let's save. So now I'm going to take this ring, and I'm going to extrude, right-click to cancel, scale, click to save, and then grab, and then we get this hole here. And then because I'm grabbing, it's sticking to the surface, and now I'm going to scale again and try to make it somewhere that makes sense. So let's put these kind of like that, and I'm going to put an edge loop in here just to make it nice. So and that edge loop actually works surprisingly well. again, we're just trying to make things flow. So I'm just like looking at the curves themselves and trying to think like, how can all of these lines flow into each other nicely. All right, so let's take this again, scale it down again, grab it again, scale it up a little bit. And again, we're just trying to not make it look like a jagged piece of junk. Just try to make these edges flow as if they were designed by someone who knew what they were doing. And there's just a lot of this where it's just like your select vertice, move, select vertice, move, select vertice, move, select vertice, move. Just trying to make all of these lines flow together. And it's really just an art. It's just really, okay, here's a line that comes from all the way over here, and how does it flow into the shell? Why is there some points that are more jagged than others? Let's not have that. So you're really just kind of taking a topology, and retopologizing it. All right, so I mean, that's, you know, given like the, you know, the past 30 seconds worth of work that we just fucked around with, that's looking a lot better already. So let's do it one more time. Extrude, scale. Everything's fucked up again, but this time we're going to cut to the chase. Just try to get this as circular as possible. And there's, you know, there's tools you can use in Blender to take arbitrary points and make them a circle. I'm not going to do that right now because this is, I think, fast enough. And then just hit F and there we go. All right, so his shell is done now. I'm going to hit save. And we could probably work on, well, let's get his entire bottom done, and then we'll work on the feet, the arms, the nose, and then I think we'll be pretty good. So I'm going to pause here, take another break, and then we'll be back. All right, so I took a quick break there, but let's carry on. So now we have this line that goes all the way from here. Basically, let's go into edge mode. We have edge, 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 excuse me, edge, edge, all the way from here to here. And what we can probably do is just deselect these two and then bring everything down. Of course, everything's going to get super weird, so we'll pull this back, fill that out. I feel like these ones should probably get pretty close to the separation in color. So this should go, you know, from where it goes from green to the white felt. And we have to fill this out. And what's going on here? There's a difference here. Why do I need a triangle here but not over here? This is where it kills me. Like, this shit is so dumb. For some reason I have an extra amount of detail over there that I don't have over here. I'm just going to make this a triangle and YOLO, because I could spend the next like several waking hours trying to figure out what the fuck went wrong there. I just can't. I just, you know, it's one of those mysteries. I mean, realistically, again, like I said, you know, if this was coming from a sculpture, it would make a lot more sense, but because, and I think I have some maybe false lines in here. Yeah, look at this. What is this? get rid of this shit. This is not a face. Delete faces. Sometimes you end up selecting shit that's like not supposed to be selected because it's on like the far side of shit, and you end up with weird faces. All right. Yeah, like why is this the case? I don't fucking know. But I'm gonna fix it by doing that because it's not worth my time to try to figure out. It's really not. Okay, so let's take these guys and let's just connect them over to there. So we have one stop. Whoops. Grab. And you know what? Here's another one of those cases where we have an extra one on this side, and I'm not going to stress much over it. I'll just expand this out a bit just to make it nice. All right, and then we have two stops, a little bit smaller. Yeah, so retopoing 3D scans is a lot harder than retopoing sculpts, because sculpts at least have reason and order to them, whereas this is just nonsense. All right, so that's good. That worked the way I wanted it to. Good. Probably have to so it really should have another level of detail here. So I guess I'll allow that. So I just inserted an edge loop there so that I could have, more vertices to work with. Whoops. Just to make the model overall a little bit better. So now I'm going in and readjusting some of these so that we can take advantage of that extra level of detail. All right, and now we just have to seal up this butt. And again, we have, for some reason, an extra level of detail on one side, which really fucking sucks because it makes everything awkward. But we'll just turn it into a triangle here. So it's good enough for me for now. You can take your time perfecting these edge loops and making sure that they're all perfectly smooth. And, if you took your time more than I did, then maybe it would actually end up symmetrical on both sides. But it's really hard to do that. And I think I just even added a point that I didn't need to be there. It's really hard to make things symmetrical, let alone smooth flowing. So I try to focus more on the smooth flow, make it look like all these lines were intentionally designed to flow into one another. And like I said, if this was a 3D sculpt, it would be much easier to do this process, because when you sculpt, you kind of do things symmetrically, and you kind of plan things to be symmetric. So things just work out nicer. We're dealing with a scan that is asymmetrical, and we're just trying our best to make things fit on both sides. So this doesn't look horrible. We're doing good. But I'm just going in and tweaking things so that they have more of a natural curve to them instead of being jarringly sharp. Like these could probably be a little bit more curved. This side already had that, but perhaps they're a little bit too far away from everything else. All right, so it looks like the only thing we have to do is the feet and the arms. So for this foot, I'm going to select everything. I'm going to select that edge loop, I should say. And I'm going to extrude, right-click, scale, grab, and then we have this hole here that I'm going to scale again. And I'm just going to try to put these kind of on the outskirts of where the orange meets the yellow. And for some reason those got super close to each other. And I'm going to extrude again, scale again, grab again, and then scale again. And what I'll probably do is insert an edge loop here and just kind of tweak some of these points so that they flow nice. And that looks pretty good. And then we'll just extrude this again. And then now we have to figure out how we want to tie this together. So probably like that, probably like that, and then oh, we have one extra here. Is that going to be the true on both sides? No. Oof. Alright, fuck it, let's just add one here. Alright, and then let's just take advantage of that extra detail. And to be clear, what I did there is I wanted this to be all quads, but because we had an odd number of vertices on one side, I just added an edge loop to this other side so that they would be nice and have enough detail. But that was kind of unnecessary triangles, but I did it just so that everything would flow nice. And we'll do the same thing on this side again right now. So let's take all of these, and hopefully we'll end up with the same number of vertices on this side as well. So I'm going to extrude, right click, scale, click, grab, and then put this weird hole in the middle. And then, so let's see, well, let's first put there. I'm just going to move these like I did before to where the outskirts of the orange are. I don't know why. So it is Halloween, and it feels weird to be editing these fall colors, even though this is a unrelated tutorial. So I'm going to extrude again, scale, grab. Okay, we have this hole. So we have. Can we do the same pattern? My main thing is, can we do the same pattern? Why is this being so weird? There we go. That we did here. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, so we should have the same number of vertices. So how did I do this? I put a edge loop in here, and then I carefully adjusted it to be in the center of everything. Could probably bring these out a bit. All right, and then so we have this one. We have one more extrusion. Let's go to front view, extrude, scale, and then we're recreating this bit here. So let's put these where they belong. All right, and then we just basically do that, and then see. So this doesn't add up, does it? Doesn't. What's going on? So 1, 2. Fuck. Well, let's just see what's going on here, and then we'll try to figure it out. So this one goes all the way through. We should have another one. Okay, where does this extra one come from? And why doesn't it go to the other side? Or where does this extra one come from? Somewhere we got an extra fucking edge loop. Or maybe, so delete this edge. That should actually go like that, and this should actually go like that. And then, oh man, this does not look correct. But keep fucking with it. Alright, now it doesn't look so bad. I just gotta move these guys over here. Yeah, that is a pretty big gap. Alright, that was pretty good. So at least they're symmetrical, and so far our retopology is going pretty good. I'm going to save because it's going well. Alright, so now all we have to do is the arms. And let's see if we can find a convenient way of doing that. So I feel like if I take this one, whoops, move it down a bit, but take these two and move them up to here. So I have two ways I could go about doing this. I don't like either. But we'll just push on. Alright, so I took this one. I'm going to take this one and make it a face, but I'm going to take this one and make it a triangle. But then I can make those two faces, and I can make these two faces. But then I have triangles again, which is not ideal, but for a 3D scan retopo, it's not the end of the world. Let's move these over towards kind of the perimeter. Not the greatest, but it works. And it's late, so I'll just roll with it. Let's take these two. So what am I going to do here? I guess these ones will become a face. This one, for some reason, seems a lot harder to figure out, but we'll get something working. So I definitely feel like I have some incorrect geometry in here somewhere. I don't see it though. So I'll pretend it doesn't exist. It might actually totally exist though, I don't know. What if we select all Alt-M, distance, nothing removed. What if we fly? Yeah, so what is this? Delete that face. I don't trust this face. Yeah, that face doesn't need to exist. All right, so we've basically done a retopo on this model. Let's just, so for this that I left for last, I kind of just wanted to leave it for last so that we could kind of even out some of these curves, because they're all going to basically come to a point in here, and they should probably be pretty evenly distributed. So I'm just going around and making sure that everything here is pretty okay looking. Man, I think I just fucked some shit up there. So the question is, I guess I could select all of these. Let's fix that one a little bit. These ones should probably go a little bit more to that direction. And, you know, this is where you can just get meticulous. And like I said, so I've been doing this for a video, so, you know, I don't have the same time as somebody who would be doing this professionally, or for someone who would be doing this you know, for their own personal project. This step really just takes time, making sure that all of these edge loops kind of flow into each other and look like they were intelligently planned. We're projecting these vertices onto the surface of a model, but that doesn't give you an excuse for not actually trying to make them flow nicely with each other. And so with that in mind, you know, I tried to do some pretty good edge loops and stuff, and I'm actually pretty happy with what I'm seeing right now. Maybe something like this could go a little bit lower. Same thing with on this side, just so it flows a little bit nicer, and then that kind of begs this one to be a little bit more in line. So it looks like it's more of like an edge loop, but I actually really like what we have here. This is not bad for a random 3D scan. And, you know, I'm just doing this topology completely off the top of my head. So I feel like we got something messed up here. This should probably be, yeah, I broke that at some point. Pretty good. Okay. All things considered, you know, this is not a perfect topology, but it's way better than a fucking 3D scan, right? So that's kind of the point of retopology, is to basically come up with edge flows that work for your scan, but also look like they were deliberately chosen, as if someone had modeled it for the first place. So what we're going to do is, after I'm just kind of doing a once over and looking at things, and with my eye kind of following edge loops and saying, is that how I want it to be? Is that the best way that I could have done it? I'm just looking over everything, I guess. Oh yeah, so we were talking about this. There are a couple ways we could, you know, deal with this. I'm going to try to spread it out a little bit more evenly. And that kind of, you know, whenever you do something like this, it kind of makes you re-examine some of the paths you had previously chosen. Because you want it to be even. And that, you know, takes its own time. See, and sometimes you select one that's like too far away, not the one that you meant to select. So what we could do here is hit Control F and say grid fill, and then click on this and try to find one that looks really good. That doesn't look bad. That looks horrible. That doesn't look bad. I think we'll leave it at that. And of course, you know, we can go in and tweak it. All right, so we have a pretty good, you know, retopo of Yoshi. It's not perfect. You know, you could basically go in and tweak this shit forever, trying to make everything perfectly smooth. But I'm pretty happy with what we have. I feel like things flow enough together that this is a worthy retopo. And I'm just, you know, again, doing like a once over, kind of looking at things. You know, it's okay that some of these things intersect because they're going to be fixed. So I'm not too worried about them. I'm just trying to make things look like aesthetically nice. Like I want, you know, let's not make it too sharp. Let's, you know, whatever. Make these edge flows look nice on both sides. So I'm going to call it here. I'm going to say this is good. So I'm going to pause the video, take a break, and then we're going to go and convert the texture to this new model. All right, and so I'm back, and we are going to take our new topology, which I'm pretty happy with, and we're going to take the texture from the 3D scan and apply it to this. So I'm going to hide the scan real quick, and here is basically what our retopologize is. I'm going to, of course, right-click, say Set Smooth, and this is what we made. And with the scan hidden, we can see that we have basically 4,100 triangles. If we hide the scan, or if we had the retopo when we show the scan, we started with 170,000 triangles. But without the scan and we show our retopo, we're at 4,000. So we went from 170,000 to 4,000. So pretty good retopo. If we look at our wireframe, this is basically what we made. And, it looks, pretty competent. It looks like, the wires flow from here up into his body, into his spikes. The wires flow down into his arms and into his feet. Like, this actually looks like a pretty competent model. And when we look at it solid, it looks like this, which looks like shit. But we're going to fix that by copying over the textures and by copying over the normal maps. And so let's go ahead and do that. So with our retopo, we had a subdivision surface we're going to apply. And we had a shrink wrap, which we're also going to apply. So now when we edit this, we have all of the vertices. And, you could, if you wanted to, I could grab this, hit double G and slide this down a bit, hit double G, slide this up a bit. You could still try to tweak the shape of the mesh, but this is up to you. At this point, I feel like for our purposes, especially for the purposes of this video, and especially since we've already spent an hour on this video, I'm not going to tweak the mesh anymore. But if you wanted to, you could turn off, the magnet, and you could go in here and say, I don't really like how this one is so sharp. I'm going to move it over. I don't like. You could do that. I'm not going to do that for this video. I feel like we have a pretty damn good model, and if you look at the wireframe, it's not terrible. I mean, there's some places like right here where maybe we could do a little bit better, but for the most part, I feel like the wireframe is damn good. Like the way that the wires flow into his shell, the way that they flow into his spikes. Maybe right here it's a little bit squished. We could maybe do something better there. But, I'm overall not super concerned. I feel like, for the most part, his model is pretty well retopologized. Maybe this one should go here, and this one can go... Come on. Something like that. Just to even it out a bit. I mean, maybe we could do some things like that. But for the most part, I feel like I did a good enough job in the first part, trying to get the even number of faces on both sides flowing down through his body, into his feet, into his arms. I mean, that's kind of the goal of retopologizing, is to make all of these edges flow well. And you could spend a lot of time doing it. And like I said earlier, also, certain things like this, it would just be a lot easier if you actually had a sculpt to work with instead of a 3D scan. But, you can take your time and just kind of smooth out some of these things that would otherwise have been better if they were sculpted. But ultimately, I'm not too worried about our results here. I mean, we're already... The model looks pretty good, and the edge flows look pretty good, and we're only at 4,000 faces. So let's get on to it. Let's stop talking and wasting time, and let's figure out what we go do from here. So I'm going to hit save. I'm going to split this window off. I'm going to choose UV editor for here. I'm going to choose everything, hit A, and I'm just going to hit Smart UV Project. And for the island margin, I'm going to give it 0.3 and hit OK. And so now you can see we have all these islands. Now, if I had done without the island margin, you can see that the UV islands are much closer to each other. But when I do with 0.03, they're actually a little bit far away from each other, which is what you want, because that will make for better texturing. And then, so now we're going to create a new image. We will say Yoshi reprojected 8K, and we will use 8192 by 8192, which is 8K in binary. So, it's a power of 2. And we will create this image, which is empty. Takes me a while to zoom out because there's a lot of shit there. And then I'm going to save again. And on our scan, let's turn our scan on. Go into Look Dev. And then we'll go into our shading. And we'll hide the retopo. So here's our scan. And if we click on our scan, we have this material. And so let's look at this material a little bit up close. We have our texture, Yoshi V0001. And I'm just going to combine these two windows so that we can see shit easier. And so this is the texture that came from the 3D photogrammetry program, Agisoft. This is the texture that they made. So it's kind of all over the place, but hey, it is what it is. It works. So we have this texture, and it goes to our principled BSDF shader. But what we actually want to do is create a new shader, and this is part of the process for retopologizing, and create an emission shader. An emission shader is basically a light shader. So if you can imagine that every point on the surface of this model is emitting light, there's like some ray that comes off of it, like pew, pew, pew. Like there's an array, not an array, but there's an array. I still said that wrong. There's not an array. There's a ray for every point on the surface of this model flying off of it. If we take our texture and put it into emission and make that our output, there's no shading. It's just literally the color of the texture for every pixel or texel on the surface of the model. So the first step is to take our 3D scan. We have the scan selected. This is our high resolution scan. If we go into edit mode, you can see that we have ridiculous amounts of faces. And on its material, we set its texture to be emission. That's critical. We make this emission. Okay. So then we turn on our retopo. We hit tab, zoom out here, and then we just hit, well, we already did this, but Smart UV project with an island of 3. So we have, where can I get, well, you saw me do it already. I don't know why it's not showing up again. Here it is. Okay, so here's our reprojected. Okay, so with our Yoshi model that we have with the retopo, we're going to create a new material. We're going to call this Yoshi retopo. And in this material, we're going to do two things. We're going to get an input UV map, and we're going to choose UV map, which is, again, the UVs that we've unlaid. And then we're going to choose a texture, image texture, connect the UV to that. And instead of choosing a file from the disk, we're going to choose our Yoshi reprojected 8K. And we're going to make sure that this node is selected. Save the file. We're going to go into render settings. We're going to say that we want to render with cycles. For the render, we're going to choose 32 because you don't need very many samples for this. We're going to expand the bake menu. We're going to switch this to emit. Now, this is where it gets kind of weird, but basically think about this. Right now we have, if we turn off our retopo, we have this high resolution mesh, which if we look at wireframe is stupid high resolution. But with this stupid high resolution mesh, we told its texture, its image texture, to go to an emission node. Okay. And then we have our low resolution mesh, which if we isolate, why is it not? There we go. You can see that we have a very low resolution mesh. It's only like 4,000 triangles. But it happens to be sitting in the same place as our high resolution mesh. Okay? But the high resolution mesh has emit on it. So with our retopo, we create this new we created this new image, and we made it a texture here, and we've selected that texture. It's not connected to anything, but it doesn't matter, but we've selected that texture. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go into our render settings, we're going to go into bake again, and we said emit. So our high resolution model, which is called scan, is set up to emission, and our low resolution model just has an empty texture selected, and we're using emission. So basically what's going to happen is the light rays coming from the high resolution model are going to be projected onto our low resolution model. So what we want to do is we want to hit selected to active and enable that. And for ray distance, we want to choose something small. So basically what's going to happen is, you can see that there's some holes here where the high resolution model pokes through our retopo model. And you don't want it to be, basically what's the distance between our retopo and our high resolution. I'm going to say it's going to be 0.1 or 10 centimeters. We can try playing with this later, but for now that's good enough. And because we clicked selected to active, what we want to do is we want to select the high resolution model, so scan, and then select the low resolution model so that it's active. So the scan is selective, but the retopo is active. And in the retopo, we have the texture node for Yoshi reprojected 8K. So we hit bake. And, this is one of those things that took me a long time to get used to in Blender. It's kind of confusing, but it makes sense once you think about it. Basically, you have two models that are sitting on top of each other. One is the original model, which you set its materials to be emission. And then you have a low resolution version of the model, which is sitting in the exact same place, but you set its material to be an empty texture. There is no actual thing connected to here. You just have an empty texture selected here. And then you go to bake emit, and you tell it some random amount of distance. And what it's going to do is it's going to cast a ray from every point on the surface of your high resolution model. And when it hits your low resolution model, because we did selected to active, it will copy that color over to its texture. And that's, it's just one of those things you have to get used to. It's not intuitive, but once you've done it a few times, it makes perfect sense. Because with our low resolution model, we did give it a UV map, and we did give it an empty texture that happens to be 8K, and it happens to be sitting on a model which looks very similar to itself in shape. So we're going to be projecting the color from that high resolution model to the texture of the low resolution model using bake with emit. I really hope that makes sense to you. I've done this dozens of times, so it's second nature to me, but I could totally understand how it would be super fucking weird to you if that doesn't make sense. But again, we spent the past hour basically making a low poly version of the model that exists on the same space as the high poly version of the model. And then we set the high poly version of the model to be emit in its texture. And then we choose the low poly version of the model. We create a blank texture. You have to have this blank texture. And then in baking, we say selected to active. So we select the high poly, and then we select the low poly, and we hit bake with emit, and it will create a texture like this for us. So I'm going to, in this editor right now, just so we can save to disk, I'm going to hit Alt-S, and I'm going to save this PNG just so it's saved to disk. All right, now I'm going to hide our scan, which is, remember, high poly. We go to a retopo and choose our texture, put it into base color. And look at that. So here we are. I'm going to just get rid of this for now. Look at this. This is a model that only has 4,000 faces, but it has the texture from the scan. But we deliberately, intelligently went in and decided that, you know what, this is where the faces should go. This is how they should flow into his shell. This is how they should flow into his spines. This is how they should flow into his cheeks or into his arms. This is how they should flow into his nose. We're dealing with literally 4,000 faces, 4,148 faces. And we took the texture from that scan and we've applied it to this Retopologize. So look at this. This looks fantastic. You know, this looks like a model that was designed intelligently, where the faces flow into each other. You know, like I said, you can always fix things like, you know, oh, maybe this should be over here, and whoops. You want to do that, but then you want to hit correct UVs or whatever. Like, oh, maybe that should be there. Maybe that should be there. Like, you know, you could spend all day trying to fix it, and you know, maybe that's what you want to do. But you know, this model is so much better, even if we don't do any more tweaking. I mean, this just looks intelligently designed, and this came from a scan. But we're not done yet, so I'm going to save again. But now we have another thing to do. So going back to our shading menu, we're going to create another new image. We're going to go to the triple line menu, image, create new, and we're going to call this Yoshi NRM for normal. And we're going to do only 4K this time, I feel like. So we're going to do 4096 for both of these. All right, so now we have a new image, and then we're going to duplicate this in our retopo material. But this time we're still going to use the UV map, but we're going to switch this to the normal 4K. Make sure that this is selected. We're going to turn our scan on again. And we're going to select, if we can, our scan, and then our retopo. So our scan is selected, and then our retopo is selected, but the active object. And then instead of doing bake emit, we're going to choose bake normal. And we don't have any other changes to save here. As long as our normal map is the one that's selected, we're going to hit bake. And this one should be a lot faster. And you can see the progress down here at this little bar. All right, and you can see it already hit 100%. And now we have a normal map. Look at that. So we're going to hide our scan again. So now we'll go back into layout, and here we have that. So we'll go back into shading, but I'm just going to move this aside. So we generated this normal map, which I should probably save. So Alt-S, save as image, just so we don't lose it if we reload the file. But the way that you use a normal map is you have the UV map combined to the normal map. You want to switch this to be non-color because we're using it as normal data, not as color data. And then we're going to create a vector normal map. We're going to choose the color, put it into the socket, and then put it into this value here. And then once EV recomputes, you can now see that without this, it looks flat. But with this, we now have the actual bump, is that a word? Bumps from the actual wool itself. So we'll turn the roughness down, actually up a little bit, because wool should be pretty rough if you think about it. But we want to have a little bit of that in there. If you go to cycles and then go to the world settings, is it? Yeah, it's this. There we go. So here we have a model that is only 4,000 triangles big. But using the retopo workflow coming from a 3D scan that had 180,000 triangles, we're now down to 4,000 triangles, and it basically looks identical. I mean, it's not perfectly identical. If we turn off our retopo and turn on our scan, here's our scan. Maybe it's a little bit brighter, but here's our scan, and then here's our retopo. And like, I mean, other than brightness, they look identical. Let's look over at a different angle. So here's our scan, retopo, and you know what? It's stupid, but let's do it. So the only real difference between this version, which is 4,000 triangles, and this version, which is 170,000 triangles, is the brightness. So let's play with that a little bit. See if we could at least make it a little bit better. So I'm going to create a color, hue saturation, put this in here. Let's bump up the value and bump up the saturation a little bit. Not the hue. Actually, you know what? Let's delete that. Let's try a brightness and contrast. Just really want it to be so what does this look like? So there's that. That looks pretty close. This just needs a little bit less contrast. There you go. That's pretty close. So here's our retopo. Here's the original. Maybe the retopo should be a little bit less saturated. That's pretty close. Look at that. I almost can't tell the difference between those two. So here's our retopo. In cycles, we're rendering at 32 samples. Here's our retopo. We have 4,148 triangles. Let's look at it from a different side. 4,148 triangles. Look at it from this side. Look at it from this side. And then switch this to our scan. So maybe the texture is a little bit softer for the felt, but that's not a problem with the retopo process. The way that you would have handled that, if you want a little bit, it looks like maybe there's a little bit more resolution for the felt on the original scan, just a little bit, a tiny bit. The way that you would have handled it is when you were baking, you would have just used a bigger texture. So I used an 8K texture. Excuse me, I used an 8K texture. You could use 16K. And then you could rescale it later. You could make it a smaller size. But when you bake, you want to kind of, it's one of those things where like, you bake larger than you need it to be, and then you can rescale it later because you'll have more fidelity. But for the most part, I mean, this is virtually identical. This is the scan. This is the retopo. And retopos will never be perfect. This is the scan. This is the retopo. They'll never be absolutely perfect. But here's how we converted a 3D scan to something that's only 4K triangles in Blender. And we kept some of that surface detail, like the felt and stuff. And also, let's play with this material just a little bit. So maybe it should be a little bit less rough. Of course, if we go all the way rough or smooth, it looks like it's made of plastic. But something like that looks pretty good. I almost want to just turn up the contrast a bit, just to make it look more felty, and then with the more contrast, we'll turn down the saturation a bit. And I almost feel like that looks better than the scan, almost. Let's go to our our cycles, and our viewport will do 128, not 12,087, 128. So there you go. I mean, right now we're literally dealing with 4,000 triangles. If we go into wireframe mode, this is what we look like, what we have. And this would be a game engine ready model, right? Because for any modern hardware or console, 4,000 triangles for a character is reasonable. Compared to, N64 days where you'd have 512 triangles for a character or something. Okay, so we have 4,000 triangles for Yoshi. This, I mean, if you just look at the way the edges flow, the way that there's nothing that looks confusing about this mesh. Like, everything kind of just makes sense. And it looks, it's a very low poly mesh. I mean, look how smooth and boring this object looks. But then once you go into, look dev, and the textures pop in, suddenly it looks like a very much more detailed mesh. And if, look dev isn't even the best, let's go to rendered. Look at this. This is when you look at this mesh, which has 4,000 polygons, and you quickly switch to this one, which has 180,000, and then back to this. Let's rotate it over here. And then back to 180,000. And then back to this. I mean, it's ridiculous, right? So this is how you basically turn a ridiculously high resolution model like this from whether or not it's a sculpt or a 3D scan. Here is ridiculous high polygons, but using the retopologize workflow with the magnet snap tool to surface or to face, and then using the modifier for shrink wrap, you can turn this extremely high resolution model into something like this. But you can carry over the detail so that the textures and the normal map carry over to your low resolution model. And so that was the goal of this video, and I hope that you learned something, and I hope that you can apply this to your future 3D scans and 3D sculpts and to your career in general. So this concludes episode 2 of Let's Help a Stranger. Again, it was a pretty long one. I feel like we're at 2 hours at this point, but maybe that's just what the series will be. It will just be me helping somebody do something technical and awesome over as long as it takes. I am going to finish recording now and try to edit this video. So maybe it won't end up 2 hours long, but it will probably end up pretty long. So that is Let's Help a Stranger episode 2. If you liked this content, please subscribe. Please like this video. Please click the bell if you want to find out when I'm helping some other stranger in the future. And I have plans for this channel, so the Let's Help a Stranger series is just one thing that I have in mind. I also want to do original tutorials. And I have actually an original tutorial lined up and planned. I just have to record it and publish it. So there's that coming up. So, to recap, we were helping out Watchtel, and he was saying, I would like to know, how do I get a quality model out of a photogrammetry scan? And I said, learn how to retopo, and he was like, do you know if the old texture will work? Well, yes it will, because here it is working. And so I gave him some steps and said I might do a video. This was 22 hours now ago? Yep. And so here we are. So here is a project in the past 22 hours where I used Agisoft Photoscan to scan a Yoshi doll that I happen to own. It's an amiibo for the Wii U / 3DS / whatever. Does the Switch use amiibos? Not even sure of that. But so I scanned this woolly Yoshi, brought it into Blender, and then retopologized it to be only 4,000 triangles, but it still looks absolutely fantastic. And not only did I copy over the color texture, but I also copied over the normal texture so that it looks really, really good. And this would be, game engine ready, or if you wanted to, it wouldn't take very hard to actually just tweak this wireframe to be ready for animation or something like that. So overall, I'm really happy. I mean, you can see this wireframe. It looks not cluttered. It looks like, the wires kind of flow into each other, and everything kind of makes a cohesive sense. So I'm really proud of this project, and I really hope that this helps you out, Watchtower. And this will conclude episode 2 of Let's Help a Stranger. And once again, this ended up way longer than I wanted it to be, but maybe that's just what the series will be. It'll, when I'm helping someone try to learn some cool stuff about Blender, maybe this will just always be one of those things that takes a long time. But this is, I think, still shorter than my first Let's Help a Stranger episode. So, like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, and if you're a stranger who needs help with Blender, let me know, because I love making these types of videos, and I love, helping people. So that's it. Bye for now.